Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Well, hello. Hi, everybody. Good morning. How you doing? It is Thursday, June 16th, 2022. Time for another hearing, almost. About an hour away. Very excited, as always. I don't know. I'm just interested to have something to say at last about, well, the fact that they're actually looking into things. That's nice. I don't know, trying to get not too overly excited, I guess, about the hearings, because we still have a long way to go to turn it into actionable something. But I am assured that by the more astute observers of the situation, that despite the fact that it's very popular to write that the Justice Department is doing absolutely nothing, that's not actually true, although when the Justice Department does things, sometimes it looks like nothing. So, okay. Anyway, it's happening. The hearings are happening. Today should be a good one. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. That's a good thing. I learned that just a minute ago reading Twitter. And here's what's up for today. Today, Kagro X, me, David Waldman, the guy telling you all this, reading it as a script, like a puppet of some kind. Now I'm angry. All right. Well, anyway, today I preview today's January 6th hearings, sort of, kind of. Spoiler alert, all the witnesses' spouses suddenly go into labor, so they just show some old videos of them playing Twister. And why not? Really, isn't that great? And the miracle of life. Ladies and gentlemen, please. It's a terrific moment for everyone who's suddenly found out that their wives are pregnant. So, okay, it's one thing that one witness didn't show up. It's another thing if you think that other witnesses are going to start showing up at 10 o'clock in the middle of the show, an hour away, like I just said, because they're not. It's happening at 1 p.m. What's wrong with you, you idiot? Yeah, I forgot. Today's the day that is today the day they're starting late? I guess so. Today was, well, I had wondered about that. I probably should have read something. Well, I just did, I guess, technically. But I should have read it ahead of time. I wondered whether, I did see the schedule earlier this week saying, okay, well, Wednesday's hearing was going to be 10 a.m., Thursday's hearing was going to be 1 p.m., and then I heard that they were delaying the Wednesday hearing, right, because they wanted to do some more video work ahead of that, and then they were, I guess, pushing it back. And what I didn't know was whether they were doing the Wednesday hearing on Thursday, and then the Thursday hearing some other day, or what. And did that mean, like, what if they had said to everybody, okay, well, I'm available at 10, but not 1. I can come on Wednesday. Well, how about Thursday? Well, okay, Thursday is good for me at 10, but I don't know. More likely it was the members of the committee who said, no, I've had this on my schedule at 1 o'clock the whole time. We're not doing it at 10 on Thursday. I can't. I have, Mahjong, my book club. I'm not certain what it was. But at any rate, there we go. And now we hear that the hearings start later. So now we got nothing to do. We just have to sit around and read articles and discuss what might happen later today. Boy, that's not exciting at all. Anyway, there's still lots happening, and I see plenty being written this morning about what we can expect from the hearings and the people who will be speaking. Judge Michael Ludwig, apparently, is this his day to make the appearance? Because everybody's writing about him. I found that somewhat interesting this morning as they were circulating a CNN article with the headline of retired judge, exclusive, I didn't get to that part yet. Exclusive, retired Republican judge says January 6th was, quote, well-developed plan by Trump to cling to power. However, I just wanted to point out that it really wasn't a well-developed plan. It was a kind of a plan. It was barely developed, and his assessment of the reality of the plan gets better as the article goes on. He, at some point, calls it beguiling, which I guess is a word that can fit, but I think also frivolous, that the claims involved were frivolous. So, as well-developed plans go, this was the most frivolous. Or I guess you could say, as frivolous plans go, this was the most well-developed of the bunch. That is to say, I mean, obviously Ludwig is a critic of this thing, and I don't know if they were well advised to choose, to go with the well-developed thing. But I suppose that will raise the panic levels in terms of, it's not a bad thing to tell the audience that, well, look, the plan was well-developed. And, I guess it was poorly conceived. Well-developed? Well, there was a lot of writing about it, and there was a lot of written materials that were distributed. That was part of what came of yesterday's revelations about Barry Loudermilk, who I imagine, as I said in the Morning Post, I have a soft spot for Loudermilks that go crazy publicly. Since his brother Elliot shot up the IBC offices of Frank Cross in Scrooged, I have, given them some leeway. And wasn't that hilarious holiday fare? Workplace violence as holiday fare. Back in the olden days when that was still acceptable. No relation, I'm sure, but Loudermilk finds himself in trouble. We'll be discussing that. And Ludwig, I think his assessment of the plan is more along the lines of what we've heard he had to say in the past, that this was actually extraordinarily stupid and dangerous. But there were a lot of words written about it. I think they might have gone in another direction. I suppose the headline writers could have thought, this will make people think that we were closer to the brink of a coup than they might previously have thought. Maybe that might be the psychology. But then again, maybe the people that Barry Loudermilk was taking on a tour were, in fact, taking pictures of all the artwork hanging in the tunnels from 100 feet away at the entrance to the Cannon office building tunnels. Who knows? There could be explanations for everything. Greg Dworkin has collected, I think, several, if not absolutely every single one of them. And,
explanations for everything.
Right. Everybody's got an excuse, Barry Loudermilk included. All right. Well, let's round it up. Good morning, Greg.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
I'm okay, as, days when we talk about insurrections go.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to start off with something completely different just because I heard it this morning and it was actually pretty funny.
Okay.
Jimmy Fallon had some great lines about Tony Fauci getting COVID.
Oh, yes, right. I forgot to mention that. There you go.
Yeah, he said, COVID probably is thinking like, hey, I finally got to the final boss, which is funny because in video games, the final boss actually takes 2 or 3 forms. After you beat him, you get some other form. Then you have to beat that, so you haven't won yet. And then after you think you won, well, no, they take the 3rd final form, and then you have to beat him again. Well, that's exactly what happens with COVID.
All right. Well, it works.
Right? And his other funny line was Fauci opened up the CDC guidelines and said, wait a minute, these are confusing. What am I supposed to
do? Yeah, right. Well, I figured that would generate – I thought that would generate more heat this morning than it has, but I guess I'm just, thankfully, I think, not listening to people who really would revel in this news.
Well, if they haven't got it, and
it's
my
coming
family
and
hasn't gotten it,
it,
it's likely that at some point you will, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But the longer you can put it off, the better protected you are, the better. So I would vote for skipping it altogether. I don't volunteer to get flu every year. I'd rather get a shot and maybe take my chances of not getting it.
Yeah.
And by the way, the kids are on their way to 6 months to 5 years being eligible, so that's
terrific.
Good. So I wanted to start with that.
Florida.
The other thing I wanted to start with is what we talked about yesterday in terms of New Mexico.
Oh, yes. Okay. Right.
Philip Bump had a nice summary of all that because it's really hard to figure out what the heck was going on. And it turns out the people they were refusing to certify are Republicans. It's a highly Republican, deep ruby red area.
Yeah, we finally did kind of ferret that out, but
it was hard to tell because nobody was telling you this. But Philip Bump has a piece of small county in New Mexico shows where big lie delusions can lead, which is why I think it's important. Story about how a small county in New Mexico has decided to reject the results of the state's primary after being infected by Donald Trump's false claims. First character, Coy Griffin. In March, Griffin was found guilty of a misdemeanor of illegally entering and remaining on restricted grounds, which is to say January 6th. Griffin's a fervent supporter of the former president, being one of the founders of the group Cowboys for Trump. He's also an elected member of the 3-person county commission in Otero County, New Mexico. The second character is David Clements. He gained national attention after being fired from New Mexico State University after refusing to comply with the school's coronavirus rules. He's turned up at public hearings around the country, sowing doubt about the reliability of voting mechanisms.
Cottage industry.
So at some point they aligned, At the meeting of the Otero County Commission, Clements and his wife Erin argued successfully for the county to engage in a review of its election results, like Maricopa County. The fact that Otero County was won by Donald Trump with more than 60% of the vote didn't matter to them. Right. And, of course, nothing was found. And Coy Griffin, the Cowboys for Trump guy, said at the time, should I honor my oath and be loyal to the people, or should I cow to the state and say, oh, no, I might get sued or I might get in trouble? So they went ahead with the probe. They authorized nearly $50,000 of taxpayer money to pay a firm called Echo Mail, also involved in the Arizona audit, also one of those fraudulent companies that they think are geniuses. New Mexico Audit Force pressed forward with the theory that the voting process was tainted. They didn't find anything. The commissioners also determined the county would ignore state mandates for ballot drop boxes and that it wouldn't use Dominion voting systems, even though there's a state contract. And so because of those things, the county commissioners declined to certify. The state went to court, and the court said, no, you have to. That's where it stands today.
That's just the mandamus thing. Okay. Yeah, I read about their lock boxes, too. They have, I think they have a one lock box or two per county, and they're, affixed to the floor, and they're in chains, and they're 24/7 video monitoring, and they were still like, no, there could be fraud.
Right. And so that, that's why the Suffolk University poll, I think we talked about it on the show yesterday. Yes. Shapiro leaves Mastriano in Pennsylvania by 4 points, 44-40. Right. But that also had a Pennsylvania senator poll, which we didn't talk about. Fetterman 46, Oz 37.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so there's that. There's also a poll that was done in May about another guy who has, well, let's just give you the non-relative of yours, Paul Waldman.
Okay, right.
Who says, whenever I see a news story that starts a man with connections to a violent extremist group, it's either the next line was convicted in federal court or won the Republican primary. But the thing is, in Michigan, it could be both.
Right. Yeah. Cool.
That's the funny thing, because there's a fellow named Ryan Kelly. He was arrested by the FBI for his suspected involvement in the January 6th, and there's a new Detroit Free Press poll saying his numbers went up with Republicans, and he's leading the GOP gubernatorial field.
Yeah.
By the way, in Michigan, should he win, it turns out that Gretchen Whitmer is leading by something like 37 points. That was a poll in May, Whitmer versus Kelly. And just to give you an idea of where things stand, but the GOP doesn't care. It was Whitmer 57 and Ryan Kelly 23. But the GOP doesn't care. Oh, he was arrested. He backs Trump. We're all in. Because after all, the first 5 people who would have voted for got disqualified because they were participating in fraud by getting bogus counterfeit signatures as part of a larger scheme. So they were disqualified, and we would have voted for them anyway because we don't care, but they're disqualified, so we can't vote for them. So we'll have to vote for the guy who got arrested. It's the only thing we have left.
All right. There are no pencils. I couldn't write anything in.
Right. So there's that. And again, the reason I mention all of that, particularly with Mastriano running in Pennsylvania, is this is active and ongoing. There's nothing about the January 6th committee that's ancient history. Oh, we already know that. It's all in the past. It's not all in the past. It's going on.
We do know it, but yes, it did. And it did happen in the past. That's true. It's, lots of things happened in the past that are continuing to happen. It's not hard to
but the fact that there are election deniers who are running and leading in their Republican primaries, let alone having a chance, if people don't take this seriously, to win their elections.
Yes.
Particularly important for Secretary of States, but in a case like Pennsylvania, the governor, because it's the governor that appoints the Secretary of State.
Mm-hmm. Right. Anywhere. Every state has its own rules about who is supposed to sign, say, the Electoral College certificates, or for that matter, certificates of election to Congress or any elective office in the state. There's rules about that. And if you're nominating people who say, well, I'm just going to make a certificate that says Republicans won no matter what happens, and I'm serious about that, you should not vote for that person. I mean, no one here is going to, but...
We'll watch the polls. It's right now, for example, in Georgia, I think it is that Kemp has a 7 or 7 points or 8 point lead over Stacey Abrams. But in Texas, the latest poll has Beto within 6 of Greg Abbott, which is a big jump for him since he had been trailing double digits. Here's one reason not to, believe the polls. I actually think Abrams has a better chance of winning than Beto does. But you never know. Either one could win if you put the effort in and get people out to vote, and that's important.
Yes.
Again, the electorate changes from election to election. It's a question of who votes, even more than how they vote. And so, as we said on the show yesterday, particularly in Texas, with its large Latino population who are younger and intermittent voters, you have to motivate them to come out.
Yes.
And that's the work you have to do. So today's headlines, besides the January 6th hearing today, which is going to be quite interesting, quite a headline coming out of the emails Eastman was forced to turn over. That's Dr. Eastman, the lawyer who was trying to convince Trump it was perfectly legal to hang Mike Pence, that he told folks of a heated fight behind the scenes at SCOTUS over whether to intervene in the 2020 election cases, says Steve Vladeck. And here's why I think Eastman was lying. And that's a pretty good position to take, because Eastman pretty much lies about everything.
Yes.
Okay. The story dates the email to December 24, but as SCOTUS had denied Kelly's application for emergency relief in a Pennsylvania case, Representative Kelly, over no public dissents, it rejected Texas Crazy's suit on December 11th, and it was just sitting on applications to expedite cert, so it wasn't actively doing anything. In other words, by December 24th, even there had been a fight inside SCOTUS, it basically was already settled. So at best, Eastman was lightly distorting the timeline to serve his own interests. But we already know, says Steve Vladeck, Eastman was publicly misrepresenting the state of pending cases, that he was being fed inside information about a fight for which there's no evidence.
A leak.
Probably he was lying.
Maybe.
I get that it's easy for folks to believe Eastman was being fed inside information, Ginny Thomas, yada, yada. I just think here the story doesn't fit. It's either wishful thinking on Eastman's part or distorting when the fight happened. That's his opinion.
Okay.
And I'm likely, I'm more likely than not to agree with that, simply because it's just, there's some things that are just too far-fetched. It's just too neat and handy to suddenly, have the screenwriters pull in Ginny Thomas at the last minute.
Yeah.
And it turns out she's the villain behind everything. Sorry, I just don't get it.
Yeah, I'm not certain, although I did see an interesting piece of information about that in the comments to this whole thread. Was somebody was saying there is, and I know that these things are true and exist, that there's a a listserv, a chat group of former Thomas clerks, and I think it's probably true of everybody's.
But we know chat groups have been overblown in terms of, we discovered this chat group and look what this liberal said, No,
I think what was interesting of that was that the report is that for some strange reason, Ginny Thomas participates in the chat group of former Thomas clerks, which is kind of an oddity. I don't know of any other justice whose spouse or significant other participates in the chat group, other than perhaps to say it's the justice's birthday and you're all invited, or something like that. But apparently that's not.
That's probably what you said on January 6th.
Yeah, right. Everybody come to the Capitol.
Everybody come to the Capitol. It's the justice's birthday. Let's celebrate in the Cannon office.
Yeah. Well, that part, if established, would be very interesting, just in terms of, maybe there's a different and unique relationship between Ginny Thomas, political activist, and her husband, Clarence Thomas, Supreme Court Justice, and that's the whole idea of developing this line of evidence, and this is just another piece in it. But
get some evidence, and I'll go with it. But in the meantime, let me give you the Barry Latimer story, because there is evidence.
Yeah.
There's video evidence.
Now, he said there was none. This is a very confusing.
That's the funny thing.
I can't believe
January 6th panel says Capitol Marcher toured with GOP congressmen.
No,
the committee released surveillance footage of a Capitol complex tour on January 5th, which was the night before.
I didn't do this.
Video of a man, it said, was part of the tour, marching toward the Capitol during the riot the next day. So a guy who went on the tour. Which was not allowed. The next day, that Loudermilk said didn't happen. With video showing at least one of them wearing a MAGA hat, which Loudermilk said also didn't happen.
There are none. Right. There were several of them.
The next day, one of those people who was taking pictures of stairwells and
very interesting stairwells, tunnel entrances,
surveillance points,
yes. Police checkpoints,
security checkpoints,
right? All the good stuff.
All the good stuff, and in areas that normally tourists don't go.
No, it's very
I'm taking a picture
boring.
of this historic stairwell because I want to see whether it's clean or not. There must be a committee in the House that looks at whether or not the stairwells are swept, and I need video evidence. That's
House
why I'm on
Administration
this
Committee would we have.
So all of that happens.
Yeah.
And Loudermilk says, "Oh, it didn't happen. Even if it did happen, you're just I'm not cooperating."
Yep, that's it.
I'm not going to answer any more questions because this is a illegitimate train of thought, and the committee doesn't count. And in fact, the committee said that the reason that they did this and released the video showing Loudermilk was a liar is because the Capitol Police investigated the claims, and on Monday, the force released a letter in which his chief said Loudermilk's tour appeared to be innocuous.
Yeah, I thought that was weird. And
that is weird, so hopefully the committee will in fact address that because that's the reason they released it. So here's the thread by Laura Rosen, which kind of summarizes the whole thing.
Laura,
which I think is good. January 6th committee letter to Loudermilk. Surveillance footage shows a tour of approximately 10 individuals led by you to areas in Rayburn, Longworth, and Cannon. These are House office buildings.
Yes, not the Capitol.
As well as the entrances to tunnels leading to the U.S. Capitol. That's like saying you were at the White House when, in fact, you were on one of those little buildings on Lafayette Square, which is part of the White House complex.
Yeah.
Where meetings are held. I've been there. I've been to the White House, but it wasn't the White House. It was one of these little buildings.
Oh. Well, those are actually harder to get into.
Yeah. And there's a tremendous amount of security. Yeah. But it's part of the White House, even though it's not, in the Oval Office.
True. Yes.
The below image shows you leading. Well, that was part of Loudermilk's saying, I didn't lead a tour in the Capitol.
Right.
No, you had a tour in these buildings, which is even weirder.
Yeah. Well, right. No one takes a tour of that. You might.
They want to see the rotunda and the statues. They don't want to see, the stairwell in the Cannon building.
Right. I mean, they don't. It's very boring. That's sometimes where you'll meet constituents because that's where the offices are.
Yeah, the buildings I was in were very boring. They were painted in pretty colors, but, pastels. Not even. Like San Francisco. But other than that, nothing interesting about it.
Yeah, the basements of these rooms are not interesting in any respect. It was very weird. Loudermilk saying, I never entered the Capitol with them, and that's true, but they were looking for something different, and that's where tourists would want to be, but oddly, these guys were not. And even the Capitol Police's letter said, well, at no point did they enter the tunnels. Well, no, they were taking pictures of the entrances and exits from the tunnel. Yeah. This is where members will be coming when they evacuate.
Areas of the complex not typically of interest to tourists, hallways, staircases, and security checkpoints. The below image shows an individual appearing to photograph a staircase in Longworth basement.
Yes. And I did see one reporter saying, well, there is one thing of interest there. They could have been, but obviously, I think it was kind of tongue-in-cheek because you have to get close up. There's a very interesting, brass sconce on the wall there, which was not what this guy was taking a picture of. And you'd have to be much closer to take that picture. It's very weird. And as I said yesterday, this is like the equivalent of, signing up for flight school and saying, I don't really care about, I'm going to skip landing day.
Yeah, I only care about taking off.
Yeah, right. Or, if you...
I want to be a takeoff expert.
If you went to an international airport somewhere and started taking pictures, not of the soaring architecture or the planes or anything like that, but of the perimeter fencing and
the
security checkpoints, et cetera. Right. That's a big tip-off. That's a see something, say something situation, which is what happened.
Which is what happened. And Laura Rosen is reading from the committee letter. According to video recordings from that day, the individual who appeared to photograph a staircase in the Longworth House office building filmed a companion with a flagpole appearing to have sharpened end who spoke to the camera saying it's for a certain person. And by the way, on that same video or similar video, persons who attended the tour talked about getting Nancy Pelosi and dragging her out by the hair. And then mentioned AOC and a bunch of other people and said, basically, we're coming for you.
Right. He did say exactly
detailed and disturbing threats as the committee described. No escape, Pelosi, Schumer, and Nadler. We're coming for you. They got it surrounded. They're coming in like white on rice for Pelosi, Nadler. Even you, AOC, we're coming to take you out. So, that seems relevant for the Hang Mike Pence committee to talk about today.
I think so. By the way, Nadler mentioned specifically one of the photos that he took of historic sites in the building was the door of Jerry Nadler's office.
Right. So the foregoing information raises questions the Select Committee must answer. We again ask you to meet with the Select Committee. He's refusing, but let me remind you, if you talk to the Select Committee, it's under oath. Mm-hmm. So that's one reason why he doesn't want to.
I see. And
then... Again, recall, Laura Rosen writes, that a GOP aide to House Administration Committee said flatly there were no tours.
Yeah.
And now that we know that there was a 2-hour tour. House Administration GOP aide in February. We reviewed 48 hours of video footage. There were no tours, no MAGA hats. Louder Milk in May. The tour was for constituent family with kids, which this wasn't.
35.
Video and photographs, people. A 2-hour Louder Milk tour, January 5th tour, photographing hallway, stairwells, entrances, MAGA hats, but no kids. Right. So basically, Loudermac is caught lying, and then he tries to bluster his way through. Right?
Yeah.
And just in the minute we have left before the break, before we go on with this, I just want to give you some info looking at the same thing from people who know those buildings so well. This is Ben Collins, reporter. The new video is jarring. He's talking to his fearless leader on January 6th, who shows a flag fashioned into a spear. That's for a certain person, he says. Niels Wisniewski, who's a congressional reporter. These are odd locations for a normal tourist to be interested in photographing. And Aaron Fritchner, who's a staffer or former staffer who has given tours, says the tour route sticks out to me. I've given many tours, and I don't understand why he showed them both the Rayburn and Cannon tunnels, separate routes from different places into the Capitol, which is where your tour group always wants to get. Why did Loudermilk take them to both?
Yeah. I mean, there is literally no reason. If you meet a constituent in your office building and want to take them to the Capitol, you might take the tunnels. Why you would go to a different building's tunnel and show two different tunnels? Because, they all have tunnels.
Well, but then we have a document in the Proud Boys case which talks about, entry points for the masses. So we'll talk about that after the break.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com.
I want to hear more about that scaffold. Like, when was it built? What were they planning? How long did it take? How did it suddenly spring up?
Welcome back, everybody. These are the questions on the minds of the staff of the show, I guess you could say, behind the scenes during the commercial breaks. What are those questions? What the hell are you talking about?
I want to know about the scaffold. All right?
The scaffold?
Like, when was it built? Where was it relative to where the rioters were? What were they planning? How did it come to be? It's pretty solid structure for just a symbol.
Which scaffold? Oh, you mean
the one they wanted to hang?
Okay. Oh, the gallows.
Mike Pence with.
Yes. Okay. The gallows. Well, we know a little bit about that. I thought you meant the scaffolding that was there was outside in preparation for the inauguration.
No, that part again.
Gallows.
You can't just
Somebody
have a noose.
brought that.
You have to hang it from something.
Yes. Right. I know, and it's interesting too. Every time I see that gallows. Described in the paper, I see people have described it in the papers as a mock gallows, and I was like, well, that's a sturdy looking mock gallows. That's you might say hastily fashioned, but you couldn't.
You might call it a working model.
Yeah, I didn't see anything that was mock about that. Like I'll put your neck in that orange plastic safety rope and kick the bucket out from underneath your feet and tell me whether you are going to mock the situation.
Well, today is the Hang Pence hearing, so I want to hear about that. So why did you build that thing? Well, we didn't have a tree.
Yeah, right. Well, there are plenty of trees, but they brought that. Somebody brought that.
They needed something in the right place where everybody could see, right there in the open.
Yeah,
and,
that
the
was
others
somebody's
didn't look
prop.
secure enough. We had to make sure that it would work.
They brought that to...
So we brought her on.
Okay. Well, I have some questions about that, too.
Well, so then there's this thing, court document and Proud Boys, according to the news.
Oh, yes.
NBC News. Case laid out a plan to occupy Capitol buildings on January 6th. Remember, we were just talking about scouting those buildings.
Yes.
Enrico Tarrio, the former leader of the Proud Boys, and four other members were indicted on seditious conspiracy charges this month. Tarrio has twice been ordered detained under trial. And the 9-page document filed in federal court Wednesday, which is yesterday, lays out a plan to fill buildings with patriots and communicate our demands. These are our buildings. They're just renting space. But the document lists 8 targets.
Yeah. All right.
Supreme Court, unclear why. The Russell Senate Office Building. The Dirksen Senate Office Building. The Hart Senate Office Building. And then the relevant ones in terms of Loudermilk's tour. The Cannon House Office Building, the Longworth House Office Building, and the Rayburn House Office Building. Oh, and CNN. So point being that if part of their plan was to occupy the building, and there was this tour that was doing reconnaissance, looking at choke points and security checkpoints and stairwells and such, is there a relation between the tour and what the Proud Boys had in mind? And that's for the committee to address, and that's part of what I want to hear today in terms of their presentation, as well as the thing about the gallows scaffolding and how it came to be, and how did I happen to have this in my back pocket, and I'll just set it up. I'll take it out of the matchbox, and oh my goodness, it's big, isn't it? That was a big matchbox.
Yeah.
That was a big pocket.
Right. Well, he had to carry it there in his truck. And I'm not certain what I'm going to make with these gigantic
Legos. I'll make a Lego gallows here.
Yeah.
Why not?
Well, it seems pretty clear that the person wanted to have that at least on display. It was an extraordinary effort to bring all the materials there. And as you point out, the list of targets in this Proud Boys document, or the document that ended up in their possession anyway, is... It is of all of the office buildings, but it's the place that I think the presumption was members would evacuate to if they had to evacuate the joint session or either of the 2 independent House and Senate sessions to consider objections. That's where they would go to, and the way for them to get there, especially with a mob outside, would have been through the tunnels that this guy was photographing the exits for.
Right, and having said that,
this is where you need to be in order to intercept the members you want to kill, let's say.
Well, detain. Let's be charitable.
Detain in a coffin.
Yeah. So Aaron Frischner, the staffer, says, now consider what Republicans said in February 2021. There were no tours, no large groups, no one with MAGA hats on. There was a tour. It was bigger than the pre-pandemic tour size limit. The footage clearly shows a person with a MAGA hat on. They lied. Now, I've given many tours over the years. That's the thing staffers do, I suppose.
Yes.
These are the biggest flags to me. You don't take them all over the office buildings. You take them to the Capitol. Right. Nobody takes pictures of the security checkpoints. The Republicans clearly and obviously lied about this.
Yeah.
If I walked down to the security checkpoint to the Cannon Tunnel right now and started taking a bunch of pictures, I have zero doubt the U.S. Capitol Police would yell at me to stop for security reasons, and rightly so. So the thing about the Capitol Police saying we didn't see anything suspicious is bizarre.
That is weird.
Ben Kamens was here on the 5th. Ben Kamens says, can confirm that I saw this group in the Capitol Tunnel between Longworth, Cannon, and the Capitol sometime between 1 and 2 p.m. on January 5th. They were unescorted by any member or staff at the time.
That
also
could
weird.
be.
Loudermilk just gave a long-haul interview explaining his side of the story. 2 points I would make that cut against what he's saying here. What did he say? His flat denial he received any letters from the January 6th committee strikes me as being extremely unlikely. They're addressed to him.
Well, right? Louis DeJoy, you never know.
But although Loudermilk deserves his time in the barrel, Aaron Frischner says, the key figure behind Republican lying, who attacked and falsely smeared Representative Sherrill for saying what she saw, was the ranking member on House Administration, Representative Rodney Davis, Republican, Illinois.
Oh,
and he needs to answer for that.
Yes, he should. Let me just point out that my eyebrows, shot up. You can tell from its radio. when you mentioned that he's the ranking Republican on the House Administration Committee, that would have made him likely one of the tellers for the counting of the electoral votes. That's a pretty interesting thing. That's the position of the people to whom the certificates are handed for actual tallying, actual counting, and adding up.
Oh my goodness! I'm sorry. I accidentally set them on fire.
Yeah,
I'm afraid we're going to have to redo.
That's
the
really
entire
interesting.
election
now. All right, and he was the guy who said what? That there was no tour.
No, nothing happened. No tours.
All right, well, that's dumb.
Yeah. Remember, said Frischner. Remember, the first public allegation of January 5th reconnaissance tours was made by Representative Mikey Sherrill, Democrat.
Yes.
New Jersey. She's an NRCC target. So when Davis and Loudermilk hit her with an ethics complaint, the NRCC made it a campaign attack. This footage shows they were lying.
So
they didn't just lie about not having given tours. They hit Sherrill with an ethics complaint for suggesting it happened. Straight up lying.
Well, okay. So it's
that's just a reminder.
For an ethics complaint against them, I suppose.
Yeah. So the whole thing is important to put in context because they didn't just do the tour. They've been lying about it ever since, elaborately so, with the assistance of what you might call leadership in the form of the
Rodney
fellow here. Rodney Davis.
Davis, okay. I forgot which.
That's a big deal. If leadership is lying about the whole, what are they lying about? Why don't you get some of these guys under? Well, we're not going to participate because it's an illegal committee. No, it's not, and we know that because it's been to court and it's been adjudicated
several times.
So, legal committee. Sorry.
Steve Bannon, I think, is the latest to try and make that claim, and he too losing.
Yeah, got thrown out. I mean, that's settled law, as they like to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, they say that about a lot of things, and we're about to have street protests about one of those things going away too. But okay,
yeah, another topic for another day. But if you truly think that there's another side to this, come to the committee and testify under oath. They'd be happy to have you.
Yes, I think so.
Right? Don't just write a book about it a year and a half later.
No one will read that book.
Nobody's going to read the book. So there's a lot going on in today's committee meeting that I think the hearings that I think are going to be fascinating to watch, and we've outlined some of them. The one that was delayed, of course, has the story about how Jeff Clark tried to overthrow Jeff Rosen. So that's pretty important too. So these are two of the most important things I think that the January 6th committee is getting at. The third one being, what relationship did Trump have with the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers? That's for another day.
Stand by. All right. Do we know what's happening? Are they moving did they pick a day when Wednesday's hearing is now going to happen? To
be determined, but all of the times are going to be 1 p.m. From now on, they're all going to be in the afternoon.
Well, that's good. They will want to hear the show.
Yep.
I don't blame them. All right. Well, Loudermilk. I don't know, man. That was kind of crazy.
And that's why I said at the beginning, I'm reading Ginny Thomas and saying, it's really weird. But I don't think that's nearly as interesting as Loudermilk, simply because there's just so much hard evidence against Loudermilk, showing Rodney Davis, ranking member of Administration Committee, are lying about what's going on here. And it's one thing, it's not the crime, it's the cover-up.
Yeah.
It's a cover-up.
Saying it didn't happen, I guess. It's the worst kind of cover-up. It didn't work.
The one with video evidence. It says you're lying. That's the worst kind of cover-up.
I just find that interesting. But, we are reminded that the official playbook does say, you have to be prepared to do things that people are going to say are facially stupid and hypocritical. And
but wait. And the thing is, when you're caught lying, you continue lying about it. That's what's so weird. I don't get it.
That's a new thing they've invented.
I get that you lied about it, but the video shows you were lying. And you're still lying about it.
No, this isn't a video.
No, they were taking pictures of sconces. Come on.
They were right. There's artwork there. Whatever. No, there isn't. What they're talking about like if you've seen pictures of the Capitol, there are places in the Capitol, in the actual Capitol building, the rotunda, where there are these fabulous, art critics might disagree, enormous, large-scale paintings, murals, decoration everywhere to take pictures of, the details of which are sometimes interesting. There, at that location, there's not. However, when they did the artwork thing, there's an annual congressional contest, essentially, that there is an art contest, and every member chooses representative artwork from their district, from school kids, and then hangs it up. It gets hung up in the tunnel, the cannon tunnel so somebody was trying to say, well, maybe they were taking a very bad faraway picture of the artwork.
Right. Or maybe it was the architecture, because in the bowels of these buildings that nobody goes to, there's fascinating stair railings and balusters and treads and newels and nosings and all these other things that are craftsmen.
You sound like Willy Wonka.
Yeah, right. Right out of Home Depot.
Well, anyway, none of the. I mean, there are some elements.
You're lying about it. You got caught lying. How can you continue to just boldly lie? Lie.
Yeah.
To the camera about
you're
this.
Used to
Say it under oth.
That's why he's not going.
That's why
because you can get punished for that, and he's not into punishment. So I don't know. Anyway, we'll see what I guess how long he continues to insist that he was doing something else. I don't see how it works. None of the things that he says he was taking pictures of are visible from there. And again, also, I guess it's sort of like going to touring the Empire State Building and being offered a ride to the observation deck, and instead you say, I'd like to go to the sub-basement in the parking garage beneath the building and see the support structures, please. Just to get some idea
I'd like to,
how much dynamite
the security
someone
office
would need.
And just take a few pictures of me and the guys.
Yeah. Could you...
And their control panels.
Right. Where's the
and their
switch
passwords?
to throw on, to turn off the electricity?
And what kind of passes they use? I want to see their badges. Could you show me that? Just I'm a tourist.
Right. Show me the trap door to the alligator pit, if you have one.
Yeah. Show me how to get in. Don't worry about showing me how to get out.
I'll take care of that. So, yeah, I mean, it's pretty damning. I really have no idea why he thought this would come out differently, but he may not have. It may just have been, I will just lie for the time being. Well, that'll get me until June.
It's the Watergate thing, right?
And we'll see what happens after that.
Mark Felt's famous line. You have to remember, these guys aren't very bright.
I guess that's
but I would all tie it in, not only with the whole scheme here, including what the Proud Boys were doing, because it was at many levels, but also the David Waldman, candidate in the box thing. These guys are not very bright, and sometimes they really don't know what they're doing.
No, so they just, you're going to have to tell me what to say, just the way you do on a campaign. Why don't you tell them you weren't giving a tour? I was, but okay.
Well, just tell them that.
Yeah, all right, I will. And we'll take care of what happens in June. And of course, that's a possibility too. Donald Trump, Mo Brooks finding this out just now about Donald Trump. Say this, and then what happens when they bring out the video? Well, we'll figure that out next, but we'll take care of you. We got your back. And then June comes, and everybody goes, oh my God, Loudermilk, what a liar you are. You're so dumb. Well, I thought you said you were going to. No, I don't know what you're talking about.
I was doing it with families, with children.
No.
We had kittens and puppies. We did, and the puppies wanted to see that sconce in the stairwell, so I took them. I mean, how could you not? Who says no to a puppy?
Right.
Well, that's
nobody.
Not what the
Puppies
video
don't
shows.
Speak English. Anyway, yeah, it's a wild time for him, I guess, and we'll see who tries to help him through it, if anybody. I mentioned that Mo Brooks just found out the other day saying Donald Trump has no loyalty to anyone, because I guess he didn't get, endorsed in his primary, despite the fact that Mo Brooks was, licking Trump's boots on January 6th and still can't get the guy's backing. It's amazing.
Well, the thing is, I know who Paul Gosar is, and I know, who Louis Gohmert is, for example. Two of the not-so-sharp knives in the drawer there.
Yeah.
But when you start learning who Barry Loudermilk and Scott Perry are, that's not a good thing.
Yeah, you need to take a break. But Loudermilk, total unknown up until this. It's very odd. But he's been there a little while, not a long time, but since like 2015 or something. And his name's never come up in 7 years. till now. But okay, well, he's in trouble.
Well, there
what
you
else?
have it. I mean, Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene weren't eligible to give tours because they hadn't been sworn in yet, I guess.
Well, they had been sworn in for 2 days by the 5th, and I thought that some of the initial reports were that they thought that they had been spotted giving tours, but I have yet to see anybody offer any evidence that those two in particular gave tours. How they would give tours is... Well, that's why
they
it
wouldn't
stuck
know
with
where
me.
anything is.
Right. I mean, but on the other hand, even before they were sworn in, right, that's possible. Murdery Trader Greene was at the White House for these meetings prior to being sworn in. She was there in November, December at meetings at the White House, which is kind of inexplicable too. She might have been able to give a tour though. She was a frequent weirdo who haunted the halls of Congress and the office buildings. Usually, I mean, on video, she was there stalking gun safety activists when they were there to lobby for gun safety legislation. But she also was there very frequently taunting Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar and trying to harass them out of Congress. Before she was a candidate and then while she was running, she was one of those people that put that stuff on YouTube all the time. So she may have known her way around the buildings in a basic way because she was working so hard at her business or whatever it was she said made her a successful business person and therefore candidate, hanging around YouTubing herself.
Well, again, so today's Mike Pence hearing probably has a lot more, including the stuff about hanging Mike Pence. But retired federal judge Michael Luttig, Michael Luttig, a staunch conservative long admired by many Republicans, will testify before the House January 6th committee, this is from CBS, with an urgent and stark message for the panel about former President Trump's efforts to overturn the election. America's democracy was almost stolen for her. He also will likely state that the Republican National Committee is wrong to have referred to some of the events as legitimate political discourse. Remember the stuff we've just been discussing in the last 45 minutes. There's nothing legitimate about any of that.
No.
And warned fellow conservatives to not ignore the gravity of what Trump did as he scrambled to hold on to the presidency. Okay. He'll also reveal how he advised then Vice President Mike Pence to resist Trump's pleas for Pence to block the congressional certification of Joe Biden's electoral victory. That's the purported main thing, but the Slaughtermix stuff is pretty interesting. One person familiar with the planned testimony said he sees his appearance as a serious and sobering moment similar to an appearance before the U.S. Supreme Court. That's because he's under oath and he takes his oaths seriously.
Yes, well, judges have done worse. They've gone crazier in other settings, of course, not recently in the Washington, D.C. setting, but as we discussed yesterday in Wisconsin, the former Supreme Court Justice Michael Gableman had no issues going to court, taking the oath, and then blowing his stack and completely and getting held in contempt of court. So they are willing to do some weird things, but Luttig signals ahead of time what he's going to do, as most of them do. I mean, there was no mystery about what Gableman was going to do either. Just
so Pence's former counsel, Greg Jacob, is likely to testify. Another person that's likely to testify is Mark Short, who was Pence's chief of staff, I think. Certainly a top Pence aide, but I think he was chief of staff at one point.
Yes.
And by the way, again, for those who don't know, chief of staff is like an amazingly important and powerful position to these guys.
Yeah, they run everything pretty much. And particularly for guys who are candidates in a box who end up in one of these important positions where you make decisions, you need a chief of staff who knows how to make a decision, right? I don't know what's in the box about this. There's no box for this decision. Well, don't worry about it. We'll give you staffers who know, as they say in Washington, and now they probably should stop saying this, where all the bodies are buried.
Yeah, that was the one part of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington that was actually true.
Yes.
Right? You have this young guy, Jeff Smith, who's like sort of there accidentally, but they give him a staffer.
Yeah, that's true. The staff is enormously important and for many years famously underpaid. And ordinarily that's a big espionage problem. But anyway,
right. So again, we'll also hear a lot about Eastman. So that's basically the summary in terms of what's going on. But it's going to be a must watch TV, and people are watching.
Shoot.
The evening hearing got over 20 million people watching, which is about a football game, which is like considered to be one of the most popular things on TV.
Huge stadium.
And during the day, I think they got 11 million or so, or 12 million, which is pretty good.
Oh,
and plus, there's replays, there's
right.
YouTube, there's streaming. That stuff doesn't even count. So this information is getting out there. Now, it's true that there's some people, it's difficult to convince a man of something when his salary depends upon not being convinced, not understanding, as Upton Sinclair used to say. And you can ignore the naysayers that say nothing's happening. In fact, it is. That's why Fox is covering it. And it is getting out there, and it will make a difference to some people. And the question is, will it make a difference to enough? And, again, with Mastriano running for governor and for all of these Secretary of State folks and for little counties in New Mexico who have election officials who can throw elections, it all matters. And so hopefully, we'll see more come out of it. And I think you could argue that as explosive as the hearings have been so far, they're just now getting to the good stuff. Yep.
These are good. They're fun hearings, and they do, at least, they're well planned, or what did Ledig say? Well developed. And they do seed these things, even for seasoned readers of this information. They do seed these hearings.
They give you teasers, they tell you stuff you didn't know.
Yeah. They've learned from the journalists who write books that, why didn't you tell us this in the newspaper? Oh, I did. I just did it as part of the promotion of the book a year later.
I'm fleshing it out here.
I excerpted the book for you in the newspaper.
But one of the funniest things, though, now that you bring that up, is sitting back and watching the reporters.
Yes.
The credulous reporters saying, "Oh my gosh, did you see that video of that tour? I can't believe it."
Yeah.
What do you mean you can't believe it? You've been covering this for a year and a half. You know this stuff. You should have been talking about it every single day. Now you're pretending to be surprised?
Yeah, it does bring back to mind the days when we were chiefly talking about, remember, these reporters, they were there. They feel this personally. And some of them continued to, and some of them just kind of got used to it and said, I was there, I know, but I didn't.
No, they know it. It bothers me. I'm not saying it doesn't bother me, but, access.
Right. It's a very weird situation. So I'm glad all of this stuff is now coming out. You mentioned the other day about the Watergate hearings being replayed in the evenings by PBS. C-SPAN, not the same thing, but C-SPAN apparently does replay the hearings that are taking place during the day in, I guess, primetime hours. I guess 9 p.m. Eastern.
If you want to see it then, or you can just go to YouTube, however you want to do it.
Easy to do, but if you're old-fashioned and want to turn on a television set and watch it now, if you have a new television set, you can, in fact, just stream YouTube over it. But never mind that. If your clocks are blinking 12 and you don't know how to do that, you can turn on C-SPAN, which I suggest that many elderly people whose clocks are blinking 12 still can find their way to C-SPAN. I know because they call C-SPAN every day.
Right. So that cleverly just made up, don't try this at home segue leads me to my last piece here. American democracy is under threat and newsrooms are mobilizing to cover it. Reporters need to focus on local election agencies and move beyond horse race political coverage. This is in Neiman Reports. It's true. It's good. And when you think about a threat to democracy, the nation's very seat of government besieged comes up. But while that's a wake-up call for the nation as a whole for a responsible free press, guarding democracy is more akin to watching a leak. It's boring, but you have to pay attention.
True. It will eventually get you in trouble.
Right. So you got to do local and federal election desks. You got to watch it.
Okay.
You got to look at counties like Otero. And, I'm sorry, I say to myself that I am finding myself subscribing to so many local papers way beyond my budget. But you have to see what's going on in local areas that are all of a sudden important.
Yes. And I'll suggest this. If news desks or editors around the country, or bean counters for that matter, are worried about their budgets, and we can't possibly, there is a team of election watching professionals who have made a practice of doing this both recreationally and then later professionally, based at Daily Kos. And they actually look at all those things way beyond, not just, if you said to them, well, you got to look at local elections. Do you mean at the precinct level or the ward level? Oh, well, no, they're pretty serious about that. So I guess you could always
or at the parish level.
It to them.
What's a parish? Well, that's why we're here.
Hello.
Is it a state or a commonwealth? Well, yeah. That's why we're here.
Right, and they're into the process. They know it intimately. Daily Kos Elections team follows everything like no one else, and it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to outsource your reporting or double check your reporting or get some assignments in the assignment desk from
or dare I say
or
it
quote them directly.
Worry less about competing and start pooling the way you do with the follow the president stuff. If you can't afford it, then why don't you team up with a local?
Yes,
we got local papers who'd be more than happy to team up with
invented wire services. But, those things have fallen by the wayside, although we were mentioning everybody using the AP story the other day. You can do the same thing, and they do, largely. But, I don't know, I suggest getting people who actually, take the details seriously. Sometimes the AP has to leave that stuff out. Daily Kos Elections, I think it would physically injure them to leave details out if they were asked to do so. But there's no budget for ink at Daily Kos, so you get to say what you want. Okay, well, that brings us almost to our top of the hour and the point of the day where we realize Greg has other things to do, I guess. Unfortunately.
We're at the point of the day where Greg realizes that Greg has other things to do.
Yeah, and you got until 1 o'clock to get them done. So
it's that time.
Yeah, all right. Well, thank you for stopping by. It is, it's Thursday already, so we won't see you again till Monday.
It's Thursday at 9:58, wherever your phone is.
Yeah. And time for getting things underway with, there we go, the music. My phone is nearby, but I had to finger preemptively on the shut up button, so you didn't get to hear it today.
Well, it's my job to professionally remind you.
Very good, and let everybody know just how the show works, the phone. So if rioters would like to come and take a picture of the phone that I use.
Yeah, where's Abby? Where's my phone ringing? This is a very professional operation here.
Abby's out today. We don't know what time it is or whether we're taking a break. Thanks, Greg. See you Monday. Enjoy the hearings. Talk to you later. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. That's really it. We did an hour. I don't see what else there is to do at this point. Might as well just leave and get ready for the hearings, except they're not starting now. They start in 3 hours. 3 hours. And, all right, you know what? While we wonder about how we segue from the first hour to the second, I'll take this moment to catch up on thanking contributors who have joined, those particularly who have joined via Patreon. New subscribers, I think, one going back to May 25th, who's been on my list to mention since I don't know when. Oh, and now I'm looking at my chicken scratch and want to make sure that I actually have the name right. I'm going to go back to the email here. There we go. I've got it right. Brian Henry, a new patron with Patreon on May 25th. And just today, this is what prompted me to, I have people to thank. Josh Warren joining just today. And what about you? That was my announcer voice. I should try to hone that too. I should get voiceover work. I have it sounds to me like I have a terrible voice for this stuff, but I don't know. I could make kooky, weird commercials or something. Or if I'm lucky, some Japanese anime illustrator somewhere is looking for we're starting a new series about a samurai parliamentarian or something like that, where I could be in on that and get help. And it'd be perfect work from home situation. If you're producing cartoons of any kind, and you need either Donald Trump, a parliamentarian, or I don't know what. I can do Arnold Schwarzenegger for you. Will that help? I've been trying to work on, is there a way for me to imitate Joan's voice for days when she's too busy to drop by? And as a matter of fact, I think I'll give you a heads up next Tuesday. She gave me the heads up. I'll give you the heads up. Next Tuesday, once again, we run into a problem because Tuesday is going to be a Supreme Court decision, opinion announcement release day, and likely to be a crazy one. And we're running out of these days before they run out of time to release this abortion decision. So, the day that drops, she's going to have to be on duty. And that's going to happen right in the middle of the show, 10 o'clock, the way hearings often do. So very likely that she won't be able to be on hand next Tuesday. So I was thinking I got to work on that. If she doesn't, but she doesn't sound like Arnold Schwarzenegger or Donald Trump, so I don't know if I have that in the bag. We'll have to work on it. Anyway, thanks again to all of you who have sponsored the show over the years. It makes it, plausible to keep going. It's tough out there, and I don't know. If there was any way to sell out immediately and make millions of dollars, I guess I'd have to do it. But maybe I could do it for a little while and then get fired by putting on a good show. And then I'll come back to podcasting. But I appreciate it. It would be, there are expenses with the show. There's actually, you have to pay, $75 a month just to host the podcasts for people to download. There's some serious outlays about that. There's subscriptions to enough newspapers and publications in order to get by. There's, living, eating, doing those sorts of things, sending kids to college, and now I'm experiencing the joys of being the, what do they call us now, sandwich generation, paying both for college tuition and care for aging parents. So there's quite a bit out there. You know all about that because you're having the same problems too, and that's why it's so special that you would be willing to part with a couple of bucks each month just to keep this show going, which I hope keeps you sane in the middle of your own experience with your own, economic anxiety. And that can lead to almost anything. So we have to keep things under control there. All right. Well, thank you again to Brian and Josh for joining the millions of people who have thought about giving some money and the dozens of people who actually have. So that's pretty terrific. And it's life-affirming every time you find out that there's another person listening and valuing what you're doing. So I appreciate it. And you should know you're doing a great thing, even if I have to lie to tell you that. So, whatever. It's hard to do this for yourself. It is. It's very difficult. I admire the people who are able to apparently shamelessly, not that there's anything to be ashamed of, but apparently without any hesitation to make these call-outs for donations and to promote themselves and to work hard to sustain a going venture without getting weird and shy about it. That's a terrific attribute, and I hope they're doing better than I am because they deserve it. Whereas there's work for me to do to be able to deserve that yet. Still, imposter syndrome never goes away. Okay, enough. This isn't a therapy session, unless you'd like to do it that way, although typically I pay for that. So no, this is out from now on. Back to Pocket. Let's hit the stories we need to hit and take a look at Twitter too. Oh, this is going to change as well. I've been using TweetDeck on my Macintosh computer. No endorsement deals here involved in this, but this apparently is being discontinued. TweetDeck for Mac helpfully informs me, is saying goodbye beginning July 1st, which sucks because that's coming up soon. And although they have a product that you can use, and you can always use the Twitter website, nothing quite as dynamic, I've found it, for me, as TweetDeck. And it calls into question the viability of the KITM hashtag monitoring situation. I'm going to have to find something similar. And maybe TweetDeck on the web sets up the same way too. But I'm so annoyed about them discontinuing this because it's what I'm used to, that I haven't even clicked the button to visit the web page to find out whether it's going to be just the same experience or not. So there. You can't make me. All right. let's see. There's lots to catch up on. Many stories here. I mentioned to you first, there was the Luttig story, and that I was a little bit put off by the language that they chose to use in the headline. Retired Republican judge says January 6th was a well-developed plan by Trump to cling to power. Jamie Gangel, I don't know how she pronounces that name, Jeremy Herb and Elizabeth Stewart reporting it for CNN. And I thought we might take a run through the story and see how Luttig describes things when they give him a little bit more space than the headline allows. Retired federal judge J. Michael Luttig, I don't know what the J is for, we should look that up, a Republican who's testifying at Thursday's January 6th committee hearing, will provide a sharp condemnation of former President Donald Trump's attempts to overturn the 2020 election, saying Trump and his allies instigated, quote, instigated a war on democracy, quote, so that he could cling to power. According to a written statement he intends to submit for the committee's record obtained exclusively by CNN, Luttig outlined in his statement how close he believed democracy came to the brink. And his written statement says this: it is breathtaking that these arguments were even conceived, let alone entertained, by the President of the United States at that perilous moment in history, Luttig wrote. Had the Vice President of the United States obeyed the President of the United States, and he's under no obligation to do so, constitutionally speaking, but had he obeyed the President of the United States, America would immediately have been plunged into what would have been tantamount to a revolution within a paralyzing constitutional crisis. It's not entirely clear what the hell he's talking about here, but I know what he's getting at. His wording is just extraordinarily flowery. But Luttig will testify at today's hearing, which is focused on Trump's pressure campaign against then Vice President Mike Pence to try to overturn the election, or what Greg calls the Hang Mike Pence day of the hearings. Luttig was involved in advising the Pence team against claims from Trump allies like attorney John Eastman, who wrote a memo saying Pence had the power to single-handedly block the certification of the election for Joe Biden. Luttig concluded that January 6th was the final fateful day for the execution of a well-developed, for some reason, plan by the former president to overturn the 2020 presidential election at any cost. The retired judge praised Pence for his actions on January 6th and his willingness to stand up to Trump and his allies. There were many cowards on the battlefield on January 6th, Luttig wrote. The vice president was not among them. On January 5th, after Pence's lawyer, Richard Cullen, called Luttig asking for help, Luttig tweeted a statement explaining that the Constitution gave Pence no powers to reject electors and overturn the election, as Trump was demanding. Pence cited the statement in his letter on January 6th, explaining why he would defy Trump and certify the election. Luttig wrote in his statement to the committee, from their inception, the legal arguments that underlaid the efforts to overturn the election were, in that context, little more than beguiling and frivolous, perhaps appropriate for academic classroom debate, but singularly inappropriate as counsel to the President of the United States of America in his efforts to overturn the presidential election, an election he had lost fair and square, and as to which there was not then, and there is not to this day, evidence of fraud. So interesting that they went with well-developed versus beguiling and frivolous. But okay. Luttig's role pushing back against Trump's efforts to subvert the election were all the more noteworthy because of his stature as a judge in Republican circles. Eastman, who drafted the point-by-point memo claiming Pence could stop the certification on January 6th, was a clerk for Luttig. And, had he come to Luttig in chambers with a draft opinion saying that this was so, he would have been told, no, it is not so. I will not write that. Go back to the drawing board. And these things happen, as he said, perhaps appropriate for academic classroom debate, which would encompass debate in chambers among clerks. You can have those debates, but then the judge says, no, my name's not going on that. Start over. Another former clerk of Luttig's, by the way, is Senator Ted Cruz. You know about who he is. I don't need to use their language to tell you. He also organized a group of Republican senators who sought to delay certification leading up to the January 6th events. In his statement, Ludwig also warned that the efforts to overturn the election amounted to an attack on American democracy, a threat, he said, continues today, we keep saying that, thanks to Trump's ongoing claims that the election was stolen from him. And, of course, thanks to the efforts of hundreds of Republicans who are running for office on the claim that they still believe Trump's claims about those things and that they will act as though they were true in both the 2022, 2024, and all future elections. That what's the point of having everybody go to the polls and vote? I'm just going to certify that Republicans win, and the Constitution says I can do that. Well, Ludwig says, this false and reckless insistence that the former president won the election has laid waste to Americans' confidence in their national elections. More alarming still is that the former president pledges that his re-election will not be stolen from him next time around, and his Republican Party allies and supporters obescently pledge the same. Obescently, wow. Ludwig also offered a defense of the committee's focus on January 6th, warning that America's democracy was almost stolen from us and urging the American public to pay attention. I don't know exactly whether that means he shouldn't widen the scope or not, but okay. No Americans ought to turn away from January 6th until all of America comes to grips with what befell our country that day and we decide what we want for our democracy from this day forward. Okay. Very nice, flowery language at the end. I want to also bring to your attention, the way this article came to my attention was from Peter Sagal, NPR's Peter Sagal, writing about it this morning or tweeting about it and saying that, as he says, I've got a completely marginal and unimportant story about Ludwig, but this is Twitter, so we'll make a thread. And he uses as the launching point of the thread the link to this story being tweeted around by Aaron Blake, and then goes on to tell his story. In February of 2016, I ran into a prominent Cook County Republican, Chicago area, yeah, and these creatures being rare in the wild, I engaged him in conversation. I asked who he supported in the then ongoing GOP, he doesn't say GOP, I do, GOP primary, and he told me, this was of course the presidential primaries in 2016, he told me Cruz was who he was supporting, February of 2016, as he was the only genuine, principled conservative in the race. Okay, well, somewhat familiar with Cruz's record, Peter says, I asked if he could give me an example of Cruz acting out of true conservative principle, rather than, say, for example, craven ambition. I might not have put it that way. Anyway, said Republican gave me this example. Senator Cruz was opposed to the Export-Import Bank. Very important, right? As true conservatives despise government intervention in the economy, even when it benefits certain powerful corporations. Cruz was contacted by Ludwig, who was then in-house counsel for one such corporation, Boeing, who was unhappy with Cruz's stance on the Export-Import Bank. You have to understand, said the Republican, the GOPer, Ludwig is a second father to Cruz, and his relationship with his own regular father is a little weird to begin with. But okay, he has a second one, and it's Ludwig, his mentor in the law and politics, and yet Cruz told him, no, even for this beloved friend, he would not compromise his principles. Wow, right? Well, cut to 6 years later, Ludwig has now condemned Cruz, to whom he really was exceptionally close, for supporting Trump's coup. And, strangely, Cruz, even though the GOP ran the whole government from 2017 to 2019, Cruz never did do anything to close the Export-Import Bank because of how totally principled he really was. Okay, thought that was an interesting story. Give you some idea of what's on people's minds when they talk about Ludwig and Cruz and the things that are going on. Okay, I thought I might throw this in here too. I saw a couple of things come by on Twitter that looked like they were of some interest. One of them got saved to Pocket, and it was from Dan Friedman, who I guess is tracking what's going on with Steve Bannon. It's the second tweet that caught my eye in this thread, so I'll just jump up and read the thread from the beginning and see where we're going here. Fugitive Chinese mogul Guo Wengi secretly paid or spent more than $500,000 to back Trump's bid to steal the 2020 election. This is a link to the Mother Jones election about it. A fugitive Chinese mogul spent big to overturn the 2020 election. Bannon patron Guo Wengi sent hundreds of supporters to the Million MAGA March and helped fund a Georgia lawsuit. We won't necessarily jump off and read the details of that, but perhaps Friedman will give us the excerpts that are of chief importance from his own article. That might save us the time of reading through it and give us space to do other things on the air today. But I certainly recommend reading through the whole article. And let's see. A corporation secretly controlled by Guo Wengi, Steve Bannon's patron. Remember, that was his yacht upon which Bannon was initially arrested for his role in, was it the Build the Wall scam? And I think he eventually got a pardon for that one, or was it something else that he got a pardon for? I don't know. Anyway, so Guo Wengi secretly controlled a corporation which paid $100,000 to Lynn Woods. Gosh, what a nut. Lynn Woods Fight Back Foundation, which is one word somehow, Fight Back. Two words if you count foundation. But Fight Back Foundation on December 3rd of 2020 for the purpose of what? To back a lawsuit that Wood filed in Georgia aimed at overturning Biden's victory there, according to Wood. Wood said Bannon arranged this payment, and there's a screen grab of the passage that lays this out. Guo's support for efforts to overturn the election went beyond simply funding a rally. Transaction records reveal that on December 3rd, 2020, the same company that had paid vendors for the November 14th event wired $100,000 to the Fight Back Foundation, a nonprofit run by Wood, the pro-Trump lawyer. In a note accompanying the wire transfer, the person who sent it indicated it was for, quote, DC renting, whatever that's supposed to mean. In interviews with Mother Jones, Wood confirmed that his group received this payment, but he said the Fight Back Foundation had no involvement with the November 14th rally or any events in Washington. Wood said the donation was instead meant to support a federal lawsuit he filed in November, which aimed to overturn Biden's victory in Georgia by alleging the state's mail-in ballot procedures were illegal. Wood said he does not know why the wire transfer indicated otherwise, and the answer is because he's lying right now. Anyway, Wood now says that Bannon misled him about the source of the money by failing to share that it came from Guo. A link again to the Mother Jones article. Is it the same one? I can't tell, but it might be a different one. Screen grab in this case saying Wood told Mother Jones that he found the donation suspicious. It smelled like a rat, but I cashed a check, and decided to put the money in escrow. Okay, well, after a year, however, Wood's organization transferred the money into its general fund. After a year, I didn't care anymore, and I took the money. Another person who worked with Wood at Fight Back, who asked not to be identified, also said that Wood in 2020 had mentioned Bannon's involvement. Mentioned it, okay, and that Wood had expressed suspicion about the money. And that Wood had expressed suspicion about the money at the time. We were just unsure of its origin, the person said. So if you wait a year, the stink goes away. And you take the money. Wood said that Mother Jones's inquiry validated his initial concern about the donation. The real source of the money, he said, was probably Guo. That's an interesting way of handling things. Okay. So might be worth reading the Mother Jones piece on that at some point and getting further background. Just tying Bannon in, as Bannon is now complaining that he doesn't deserve all of this bad publicity and being accused of being involved in all of this, even though he was in it up to his, up to his elbows, I suppose, and had been predicting that he would create exactly the sort of chaos that this morning's controversial reporting about who was supposed to be the source of this stuff, Eastman and Cheeseborough, and memos to the Supreme Court and memos from the Supreme Court saying that there might be 4 votes to take up the case, all this stuff. But it feeds into the Bannon's role very clearly, I think, was to create the sort of chaos that Eastman claims he had heard the Supreme Court might use as motivation to take up the case. It seems like they were all over the place, and it was a part of, if not one of the 7 stages that the January 6th committee is outlining, certainly eligible to be considered as an 8th element of the conspiracy. At any rate, let's see. Speaking of Eastman and what's going on there, Kyle Cheney is talking about that this morning. I happened to catch Eric Kleefield commenting on Kyle's tweet, one of many in his thread, just saying, the comment being constitutional Calvin ball. I said, oh, well, what's this about? In particular, in response to this Kyle Cheney tweet saying, as part of this longer thread, which I'll go back and read, soon the select committee would reveal that Eastman believed his Pence strategy was dead on arrival if state legislatures refused to certify new electors, and none did. But Eastman pushed the plan forward anyway, according to a Politico article here linked by Cheney, and that's the constitutional Calvin ball that we're talking about. So what's up with this thread? Maybe we can fit it in before we break for the bottom of the hour. Kyle begins with this thread about an hour ago, Understanding Eastman, and I guess it's linked to this Politico article about him. Eastman takes the 5th with the January 6th committee. How do you understand him? For the past 6 months, the January 6th committee has battled John Eastman in court to obtain his emails. Along the way, we learned an enormous amount about his relationship with Trump and how Pence world protected itself from his tactics. A look back. Probably a good setup for today's hearing. In December, Eastman revealed he was pleading the 5th to the Select Committee, but a few weeks later, the committee would subpoena Chapman University, Eastman's former employer, for 90,000 pages of emails that Eastman sent between November 3rd and January 20th, 2021. In January, U.S. District Court Judge David Carter ruled forcefully, you know about this one because of the way he put it, ruled forcefully in the Select Committee's favor, rejecting Eastman's attempt to swat away the Chapman subpoena and forcing him to read 1,500 pages a day and begin disclosing them to investigators. This was, of course, the same judge and in the same portion of the case in which they said, yeah, you'll have to give over even more of your emails than you anticipated before because you may also be subject to the crime fraud exception from various privileges, including the attorney-client privilege, which you're claiming now. Carter would next order Eastman to prove the legitimacy of his claimed, there we are, attorney-client relationship with Trump before they even get to the crime fraud exception. Are you sure you are Trump's attorney or even Trump's campaign's attorney? Can you prove it? Is there a letter retaining you? Are you being paid? Are you representing him in court in any way? You say you're an attorney and he's your client, but there's more to it than that. Not to mention the crime fraud exception. Well, anyway, this was an endeavor that forced Eastman to disclose how he came into Trump's orbit. And the answer was through Cleta Mitchell in September of 2020. She, of course, was the lawyer on the phone with Trump when he called Brad Raffensperger to tell him to steal the election for him in Georgia. The Eastman litigation became the forum for the January 6th Select Committee to assert in early March that it believed Trump violated multiple laws in his attempt to subvert the 2020 election. Kyle goes on to say, we noted in March that John Eastman seemed to express initial confidence that Clarence Thomas would vote in favor of Pence's power to unilaterally prevent Biden's election. That took on new significance with the release of the Ginny texts. Okay. Then came the most important development of the investigation. Judge Carter ruled that Trump and Eastman likely entered into a criminal conspiracy to obstruct Congress and defraud the United States. The committee has repeatedly cited that ruling this month, and good of them to do so. Carter's ruling only ordered the release of a few hundred pages of emails sent between January 4th and January 7th of 2021. There was still a broader fight over Eastman's emails dating back to November 3rd of 2020. Last month, the committee and Eastman narrowed the fight to just a few hundred documents. That was bound to happen eventually, but you start off with capturing as many as possible and say, we can rule out the ones that aren't relevant, but we're going to have fights over a couple more of them. While this fight played out, a batch of Eastman's emails obtained via public records request from the University of Colorado detailed his advice to state legislators that he hoped would appoint Trump electors in states that Biden won. As he fought against the release of more emails in Judge Carter's court, Eastman provided new details about his contacts with Trump in the weeks before January 6th. More after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. I was just poking around, looking at things, and now I don't know if I've gotten myself back to the right spot where we left off in this Kyle Cheney Twitter thread. But we'll start again here. It was probably right around here. While the fight was playing out over how to narrow the scope of the response required from Eastman in disclosing his emails, at that point, while this fight played out, a batch of Eastman's emails obtained via public records request from University of Colorado, right, detailed his advice to state legislators that he hoped would appoint Trump electors in states that Biden won. As he fought the release of more emails in Judge Carter's court, Eastman provided new details about his contacts with Trump in the weeks before January 6th, as well as with a, quote, civic group discussing strategies to overturn the election. I wonder what civic group that was. And then finally we arrive at the tweet that started this, or caught my attention, when Eric tweeted that this was, what did we say, constitutional Calvin ball. Soon the select committee would reveal that Eastman believed his Pence strategy was dead on arrival if state legislatures refused to certify new electors. None did. But then this is interesting. Eastman pushed the plan forward anyway, which is interesting because in light of what we've been talking about Trump and his state of mind, and did he really believe that he had the election stolen, and did it make a difference, and was he really telling people that he had a genuine belief that that was the case, and that's why he needed them to do this, or was it really just about fundraising, or was it really just about clinging to power? Or did he, in fact, know that he hadn't won, or that there was no hope for him to win in court or through this stupid plan with Mike Pence, etc., but continue on and do it anyway? Which is a separate question. There's an interesting line of inquiry about what that might mean if he did or didn't really believe it. But now there's a parallel line. Here's Eastman. Did he really believe it? I don't know. It depends what they are charging him with, and I guess maybe we have to get into that discussion sooner than I thought. But let's finish with the thread and see if we can circle back around to it. But I guess if you're if you end up charging Eastman with anything, it might make a difference. And here, it was not entirely clear whether or not they'd be able to charge him with anything. He is, after all, putting forward a legal theory, which, while it might be profoundly irresponsible, as Ludwig says, to be doing that, especially, one, with any president of the United States as your audience, and two, specifically with Donald Trump, known to be gullible and susceptible to these sorts of things, or at the very least, known to be receptive to very, very bad ideas, not only poorly founded ideas, but ideas that are terrible for America if they happen to be good for him. He has no interest in what is or isn't good for America. The only thing that he cares about is what's good for him. He may even, it's possible you could argue that he sees those as the same things. I'm not certain it would matter, depending on what he's charged with. But Eastman, if he's just putting forward theories, well, like Ludwig said, maybe for the classroom, but certainly not before the President of the United States, and definitely not before this President of the United States. Could you charge him as part of the seditious conspiracy? You might be able to do that. I guess we could get to that question right here and right now if I can find what we were talking about. But there was a little discussion over on the Twitters yesterday about that with me and Greg, and I'm going to have to scroll back and find it so I can remember which one of you had brought this up and had asked the question, sure, all this stuff was terrible, but what would they be charging Trump with specifically? And there are plenty of things, but I'm going to have to scroll back and find it so I can find the context and be clear and help explain exactly what it was that we were talking about. So, all right, I'm almost there here. I think it will take a bit longer to find than I thought, but it is in here. Here we go, finally. Bosengood, our friend from Daily Kos as well, right? Bethesda 1971 / Bosengood on Twitter. And now I remember why it was so awesome. They said, great show today. And I said, wow, that's nice. But talking to me and Greg, great show today. Let's say Trump sincerely believed the election was stolen, but proceeded with the insurrection activities, like inciting the crowd, not doing anything, saying Penn should hang. There still has to be some criminal statute covering it. And we were talking about the failure of Congress and the founders and others, reasonably understandable failure, to anticipate stuff this crazy. Did they design a statute that would apply? And certainly nothing that was specific about what Trump did, but plenty that, generally speaking, could be applied to him. By the way, we're informed here, unlike Greg, I am a lawyer, but not a criminal lawyer in the practice sense or the Saul Goodman sense. Me too, and also not a practicing attorney in any sense, but I understand the background of these things and how to read these things enough to try and figure out why one statute or another makes sense. But my quick reading of this thing is that there are a couple of options available, and nothing I had to look up either. This is what DOJ has been using in prosecuting January 6th cases to this point. Two directions you could go. The things you hear people being charged with are, one, obstruction of an official proceeding, now that they have established. There was some question about whether or not what was going on January 6th counts in the definition of official proceeding. It should, and facially I think everybody would say, well, yeah, it's the most official proceeding there is. But there, it's a legit question. Well, what do you mean, official proceeding? Does this fit into that definition? And they asked that question. The defendants brought that up in front of multiple federal courts, and multiple federal courts said, nah, it's pretty obvious as an official proceeding. So, okay, yes, you can be charged with obstruction of an official proceeding. Now, there were others, Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, etc., who've been charged with seditious conspiracy, right? But they also were possibly facing charges that are, that's a legitimate and separate charge. Insurrection is a different statute? Why charge someone with seditious conspiracy versus insurrection? Or why threaten Donald Trump with obstruction of official proceeding instead of seditious conspiracy like the rest, or insurrection for that matter? Because the insurrection statute, like I kept saying, is kind of tailor-made for what he did. That's the one that says whoever sets on foot a rebellion or insurrection, shall be guilty, and serve X number of years, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a clear definition of insurrection that's out there, but also for people who don't participate directly, if you incite or, as they say, set on foot such an insurrection, you can be held criminally liable for that as well. But what about the difference that it makes whether or not Trump really believed that the election was stolen? Well, if he really does believe it and really thought that he was right, then maybe the seditious conspiracy, or rather the insurrection charge, doesn't work because, well, let's see. We'll go and take a look at it. We might as well just dive completely into this thing. The insurrection statute, which I've tweeted around before, is what? 18 U.S. Code 15, is it 1515? Or 1505. I can't remember exactly what it is, but let's try 1505. Is that the one? Yeah. That's the obstruction one. Okay, well, let's just jump into that. And somewhere I actually have a screen cap of the setting on foot thing. There it is. Okay, and that is, might as well open it up. Okay, totally different section, but same title. 18 U.S. Code, section 2383. 1500s, the sections in the 1500s are the ones dealing with obstruction, right? But 1505, obstruction of proceedings before departments, agencies, and committees. And I guess that's why there was grounds for the initial but brief consideration of the question of, does the joint session of Congress in which they're counting the electoral votes count as a proceeding before a department? No, not really. Agency? Nah, not really. Committee? Closer, but a joint session of Congress. Is it a committee? Well, the question is, for purposes of this statute, does it in fact work? And the decision of the courts was that it does work. Of course, when the House is meeting as the House, they might be meeting as a committee of the whole, and the joint session might be certainly. It was enough for the judges to say the analogy is strong enough. This is clearly the sort of thing that was meant, sort of things that were intended. And it begins by saying, whoever with intent to avoid, evade, prevent, or obstruct compliance in whole or in part with any civil investigative demand duly and properly made under the, this is interesting, this is the original intent of this, was not about presidents obstructing the joint session at which they are elected to the presidency. It was clearly not contemplated. But general analogy made to this, whoever obstructs these official proceedings with here it says with a civil investigative demand of a agency, department, or committee, and this demand properly made under the Antitrust Civil Process Act. Whoever then willfully withholds, misrepresents, removes from any place, conceals, covers up, destroys, mutilates, alters, or by other means falsifies any documentary material, covering everything. Answers to written interrogatories, oral testimony, which is the subject of such demand, or attempts or to do so, or solicits another to do so, or who corruptly, or by threats of force, or by any threatening letter or communication, influences, obstructs, or impedes, or endeavors to influence, obstruct, or impede the due and proper administration of the law, any law, under which any pending proceeding is being had before any department or agency of the United States, or the due and proper exercise of the power of inquiry under which any inquiry or investigation is being had by either House, or any committee of either House, or any joint committee of the Congress. shall be fined under this title, imprisoned not more than 5 years, etc., etc. Okay? So, the question of, well, does this count, was resolved in the positive every time. Nobody has said yet, no, this doesn't count. So, you could charge him with this. So, that being said, what does it say at the outset that you need to be able to prove? That the person has intent of some kind, and to avoid, evade, prevent, or obstruct compliance with some law. So, that's the question. Did he intend to avoid, evade, or prevent, or obstruct compliance with the law? Well, if the president is saying, no, the election was stolen, the actual correct application of the law would be to declare me the president. That might make a difference. The jury might say, well, his intent wasn't to avoid or evade or prevent or obstruct the carrying out of the law. It was the very opposite, in fact. Well, in that case, you might want to charge him with something different, like, for instance, obstruction of an official proceeding if he thought he was right in all of this. May be the right fit, might not be the right fit. Insurrection, though, if they know that he knew he was wrong. For instance, whoever, as I was saying before, incites, sets on foot, assists, or engages in any rebellion or insurrection against the authority of the United States or the laws thereof, and gives aid and comfort to, shall be fined, imprisoned, etc. In other words, somebody who says, no, I'm wrong, but I'm launching a rebellion or insurrection. I defy the power of the United States. They're right, I'm wrong, but I'm going to do this anyway. Then you charge them with insurrection. If you think you might be right, maybe obstruction is a better statute, whether it's the knowledgeable, willful obstruction mentioned in the first paragraph of, 1505? Let's jump back to that. Or the one that doesn't necessarily require that you know or think that you're right. The second paragraph here, the second clause, whoever corruptly or by threats of force or any threatening letter or communications obstructs or impedes endeavors to influence, obstruct or impede the due and proper administration of the law, etc., without any particular requirement of belief that you're right. If you are impeding the operation of law that is going to settle the question of whether or not you're right, you're in trouble for that too. So there's two different directions you can go under 1505. One that requires an intent, and one that doesn't require intent, but requires that there be threats of force or hints that it might be brought to bear in order to disrupt things. If you're going to go the threats of violence route, it doesn't really matter as much what your intent was or what you believed the state of the law was. So you charge them with different things as a result. That brings us back to what we were considering before, that it's interesting that Eastman has decided that, okay, my whole stupid theory was dependent on states resolving through their legislatures to send new certificates with new electors being appointed for their states. And if that happens, then Pence has the authority to Now, he's wrong about Pence having the authority, but his theory was if those new certificates come in, Pence has the ability to decide which one to count. Wrong, but it doesn't matter because nobody sent anything official. There were fake ones, but nothing that came with the imprimatur of the state's legislature, right? But Eastman says, instead of saying, well, this whole thing depended on having these certificates with the backing of the state legislature. We didn't get them. However, we should do this anyway. In other words, that's him saying, well, I believed we would have been in the right had the state legislatures acted, but they didn't. However, we should go ahead anyway is pretty much an admission either that your first theory was bogus from the beginning or that you no longer care that you're in the right. You now have the intent to obstruct things and defy the rightful authority of the federal government of the United States, regardless of the fact that you no longer believe you're right. Pushing forward anyway might put you in a different category of what you can be charged with. Kyle continues with this. Then came the revelation that one of Eastman's emails, which Judge Carter decided was evidence of a likely crime, was a memo to Rudy Giuliani from another Trump lawyer laying out the Pence strategy in detail. And I think that's the Cheeseboro memo. Last week, Carter gave the committee another enormous boost when he ordered the production of another 140 emails, including contracts between Eastman and the still anonymous high-profile leader of a civic group in mid-December. That leads us to understanding Greg Jacob, who I guess is slated to testify today. Another series of tweets by Kyle Cheney, and perhaps we ought to continue along with this since he's connected the two of them. The Pence advisor who's taking a star turn today was the intellectual force behind Pence's resistance to the Eastman strategy. At least he was right. He began that push on December 7th when Pence deputized him to study the Electoral Count Act, and January 6th. It's worth reading every word of this exchange between Eastman and Jacob on January 6th, even as the violence was raging outside the Capitol and Jacob was on the run. And the transcript of it is a part of an exhibit to the litigation in which John Eastman sues Benny Thompson as in his role as chair of the committee, and other members of the committee, the Congress, etc., etc. Jacob's month-long deep dive, wow, could have made a podcast out of it, into the Electoral Count Act led to this January 5th memo, which we revealed publicly last week. This memo describes several ways in which Pence World came to view Eastman's plan as illegal. The Politico article attached here, Pence World's final takedown of Trump's January 6th bid to remain in power. That still remains, that whole story remains in pocket. We haven't read through it. It's very long. But I guess once again reminding us that that's worth our time. To reflect their conclusion, Jacob worked with Pence and the House and Senate parliamentarians to alter the language that vice presidents typically use during the January 6th counting of electoral votes. We've mentioned this on the air before. Side note, Kyle says, I caught this change during the actual count on January 6th, which I found notable, but didn't seem earth-shattering at the time, given the violence that had just occurred. He includes his January 7th tweet that says, it's 2:55 a.m. and I just figured out how Pence massaged the rules of the Electoral College counting session to avoid introducing the, quote, rival slates of Trump electors. These are the instructions that VPs have given out at the start of the last 5 sessions. Do you notice the difference? And we'll just start with the one previous in 2017. After ascertainment has been had that the certificates are authentic and correct in form, the tellers will count and make a list of the votes cast by the electors of the several states. In 2021, he says, after ascertaining that the certificates are regular in form and authentic, the tellers will announce the votes cast by the electors for each state, beginning with Alabama, that the parliamentarians advised me is the only certificate of vote from that state that purports to be a return from that state that has annexed to it a certificate from an authority of that state purporting to appoint or ascertain electors. That's an important point. Not only that Kyle Cheney caught it, but that the language that he uses to fix it is important in itself, but it's even more important on a second level. It's important that he says, well, what I'm saying here is that we're going to, this is his reason for anyone listening who knows about the plot afoot to send alternate electors who believe for some reason that Pence would announce those slates instead and hand those slates to the tellers to be counted. And that, too, by itself doesn't actually solve the issue. We've been complaining on the show for a long time that there was no plan, even if Pence wanted to cooperate, to get those so-called electoral slates onto the floor. It would have required the same clerks in the House Clerk's office and Secretary of the Senate's office, who, dutifully carried away those chests, the locked chests of the Electoral College certificates with them and protected them from the rioters. And everybody thought, oh, they saved the Republic there. And it was a good thing to do. I'm glad that they did it. But we've pointed out there are other copies of the certificates in case of emergency. But best that they protect the ones that they have. Why create chaos? Why create more chaos in the face of chaos? But it would have required those people who were so dutiful that they protected the physical safety of those certificates, even though there were duplicates elsewhere in Washington, D.C., it would have required them to say, to hell with it. I'm going to put whatever shows up in the mail and purports to be a certificate in the box, and I'll hand them both to the vice president. There was no way that they were going to do that. But supposing you convinced them to do so, because they got a directive ahead of time from the president of the Senate saying, I want to consider the genuineness of these other slates. They might have said, that seems awfully dumb and seems like a crime, but I'm being ordered to do so by the president of the Senate. Maybe I have to give this to and let Congress work its will. I'll cross my fingers. I'll advise them through the parliamentarian's office that these things are fake and they shouldn't count them. But if he demands to see them, I might have to give them to him. That is possible. So they come up with this language, and they say, all right, well, we're going to start with Alabama's, and the parliamentarian has advised me that's the only certificate of the vote from that state that purports to be a return from that state that has annexed to it, I would have said attached, but they say annexed to it, a certificate from an authority of that state purporting to appoint or ascertain electors. That was a signal that the fake certificates had showed up, perhaps, but they were, one, ascertained to be fakes, and two, ascertained to be fakes by the fact that there were not annexed to them any certificate from an authority of that state purporting to appoint or ascertain electors. It was just people signing a document saying, I call myself an elector. So that's good reason not to count it. And that's his explanation and his signal to people who thought that he might count it that he wasn't going to. But it also says that the real problem, in his view, is that there's nothing annexed to the certificates from an authority of that state purporting to appoint or ascertain electors. And you see what's happening here? Doug Mastriano, among others, is running for governor of Pennsylvania, and other people are running for secretary of state and governor and lieutenant governor and other positions in other states as Republican nominees. But in particular, Doug Mastriano says, I will annex to the fake certificates, if necessary, a certificate from an authority of this Commonwealth, Pennsylvania, purporting to appoint or ascertain electors. And the language that fixed it, in Kyle Cheney's view and others, that was Pence's intent. The language that got him out of having to bend to Trump's will won't make the same sense in 2024 if Doug Mastriano and people like him, apparently duly elected as governor of Pennsylvania or secretary of state of New Mexico or whatever the position might be, if they're willing to sign something that says that untrue thing, that these are the real electors, and annex it and send it, Mike Pence or someone like him is going to have to come up with new language. Or, of course, the clerks could say, this is a fake certificate. It is signed by a governor. It is signed by a secretary of state. It might be signed by both of them, for all I know. But we're not going to send it to the floor. It ain't right. It's not true. But how will they make that decision? I think those clerks probably will have to send that to the floor. And they will have to have a fight. And that's the plan. That's the design. To get those things to the floor and say, I don't know what to tell you. Yes, CNN, ABC, AP, all the official news outlets that have a consortium that are supposed to, report the vote counts, and the actual vote counting in these states says Biden, or whoever the nominee may be. I don't want to raise that controversy. It says Biden won in 2024. But the law says that the certificate I'm supposed to read is the one that has the governor's signature on it. And the one that has the governor's signature on it, for better or for worse, Doug Mastriano, crazy-ass governor of Pennsylvania, has signed one that says Trump won. What do I do? And I'm not certain that the clerks are willing to make that decision themselves. So I think that's an awfully important point. So I was willing to waste the last 5 minutes on it and not get through the rest of Kyle Cheney's thread. We can see what else we can read, perhaps over the music, while we show ourselves to the door and get things started on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. But here we go. There was a second change to the Pence script that I didn't catch on that day, and which Pence World would later confirm. It was an explicit refutation of Eastman's claim that Congress wouldn't get a say in the January 6th session. And he has attached a Politico article that I'm going to have to read as soon as I get off the air and decide whether I need to read it to you. Kyle goes on to say, which brings us to today. Greg Jacob is appearing under subpoena, though he appears to be a willing and cooperative witness. Until now, this is the most detail we've gotten about what Jacob told the Select Committee. It was filed as part of the Eastman litigation before Judge Carter. There's a screen grab that goes with this. Mark Short also talked to the committee about Trump's final call with Pence on January 6th at 11:20 a.m., an important focal point of the investigation we may learn more about today. The committee has spent a lot of energy trying to reconstruct what happened on that call, but Pence appears to be the only person who can testify to how he responded to Trump. Love to conclude a mega thread and realize there's a typo, by the way, in the first one, Kyle reminds us. So keep an eye on those hearings. Kyle's as interested in them as you are. And we'll see what changes were made. And again, just a good reminder that even if they change or reform the Electoral Count Act in some way, if they don't account for the fact that there might be governors willing to knowingly sign a forged certificate of election, I don't know how they're going to deal with it.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Walt.
There may just be no way of dealing with that, which is the scary part of this whole thing. We can talk about that on Friday, talk about all the other things that I wanted to include today and didn't. There were so many of them, and I'll regret it, I know. But what you won't regret is hearing more about these stories and others by staying tuned for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam next. See you tomorrow.